Hi, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and today I wanted to show you a little comparison video between the two double wedding ring quilts that I just completed. And I've got them pinned up on my design wall, and I've got them pinned next to each other so we can kind of pull them over and look at them. This is the one I just completed. This is the larger of the two double wedding rings. This one was hand pieced, and this one was relatively flat, and it did come out really flat after I've got it quilted. So I'm really happy with the way it turned out. The smaller one that I did a few weeks ago, this one was machine pieced, and the piecing was done, I believe, with templates. And the reason I think that is because the ends of all of the pieces within the rings was curved, like it looked like a Dresden plate template to me. You know, you see those curves on a Dresden plate template. That's what it reminded me of. This one I treated, the first one, with it's all quilted in hearts in all the background sections, and that went fairly fast as far as quilting goes. And then we did continuous curve in the rings. This is the one that I had to tuck in fabric around the edges of the background pieces to get them to lie flat, because there was a lot of fullness in this top. So this one was a bit time consuming because of all of that fullness that I had to deal with. But otherwise, I think the design turned out pretty well, and you can see part of that in the back here. I think it's pretty well balanced, and it was fast and it was fun to do, other than having to deal with the fullness, which, you know, that just comes with the territory. Now, double wedding ring quilts are not easy to piece. I don't know if you've ever tried one, but I have, and they're difficult. It's not an easy pattern, and I can see where it would be very difficult to get a top to come out flat, because it's just, you've got all these pieces and they're actually all different shapes. This isn't the same shape all the way around. They're different shapes, and you have to make sure those pieces are in the right place, and your seams are, you know, perfect, and then you're piecing all these curves. So if you're not familiar with piecing curved pieces, it can be difficult. Now, I don't usually have trouble with curves. I've done several Drunkard's Path quilts, and you know, once you know the technique, it's not too difficult. But this is a pattern I could not master, and when I tried it, I just had a lot of fullness in here, and my pieces wouldn't go together. So I didn't make a lot of pieces before I started putting them together to see if I could get it to work, because I was struggling with it from the beginning. And I think I'm just not patient enough for a quilt like this. So if you can make one of these, you know, you're an excellent quilter, because this is just difficult. So if you are looking for vintage tops and you find one of these, and you can find one that is square without the fullness, you know, grab it, because there probably aren't very many like that. Okay, this design is the one I did a lot of ruler work in. This was freehand, and of course the continuous curve, but this was ruler work in here, and this was ruler work in here. So it took me, just doing the backgrounds going across, I had it set long ways on the machine, so it was like 8 rings across. It took me 2 hours just to do the background for each row. So that is 16 hours just to do the background of this quilt. That's not counting the stitch in the ditch, which I do first. That took several hours itself. That took, I don't know, 4 to 6 hours to do that. And then the continuous curve took me about 8 hours. That includes the cross hatching here too. So my plan of attack on this quilt was to stabilize it, do the backgrounds, do the rings and the 4 patches, and then it's done. So altogether in this quilt, there's 8 rows of rings that took me 2 hours a piece. So we got 16 hours. If we count 4 to 6 hours for the stabilizing, that would be like 22 hours, and then about 8 hours for the continuous curve. And you're looking at 30 hours in this quilt. Now, if this quilt was the same size, this one went a whole lot faster. It took me about 20 minutes to get the end of one row to the next, and that also counts for the continuous curve in the rings. I would not charge the same amount for this quilt that I would for that one if they were the same size. I just wouldn't, because I would lose money. So if you are quilting for your customers, you need to consider how much time it's going to take you to quilt it, if you can figure that out, which I know is hard to do ahead of time. And I've lost money on a lot of quilts because I miscalculated how much time was actually going to take me. And so I think it's good to have a pricing range if you can do that, if it's something that you think your customers will go for. You know, let them know this will cost you between this amount and this amount, depending on how much time I have to put in it. That way they know kind of what to expect. I like this quilt better. I like the colors in it. I think they're brighter. The fabrics, I had mentioned that I recognized some of these fabrics from a previous quilt that I had made, and I made this quilt in about 1985, and it was a trip around the world. And actually in this shot, I can't show you that fabric because I don't see it at the moment, but it is in the quilt. Oh, there's one way down here which you cannot see, but it is, I'm kind of judging this as a 1980s top. The red pieces are batiste, I believe. They're not cotton. And the piece of fabric that I recognize in a previous quilt of mine, that is also, it's a poly cotton blend. It's not 100% cotton. So I know this isn't a vintage top because of that. So I am dating this around 1980s. There are some feedback pieces in here though. So, you know, it has a wide range of fabrics in it, but you know, your quilt is only as old as the oldest fabric in it, or in this case, the quilting in it makes it a modern quilt. This is a 2019 quilt now. But it is actually worth more than it was as a top, because it was just a top and it was a 1980s top. It wasn't worth that much. This one here is kind of the same. Here is a feed sack piece here and another one here, but there are some more modern fabrics in here like this one, and there's some others throughout. There's this one here also, which is a more modern piece of fabric. So this is probably the same. It's probably maybe a 1980s, 1990s, maybe a little bit newer than that. The background is muslin. In some areas, this is muslin. This is a polyester fabric here. So this one has a variety of different things in it. So I think I like them both. I think they turned out pretty well. This one was fun. I like doing the hearts. This one is more of a classic look, even though it's more of a modern pattern. And I just like the fabrics better in here. I think it's the red in it, just makes everything kind of pop. This one, and you notice that's the same fabrics where the rings join in every area. This one is not. There's the centers where they join is different in every single area. So there's no consistency in the way the piecer chose the fabrics to go in there. And I think this one is just more graphic, I guess, and is just more organized, and maybe that's why I like it. I don't know, but I think it's the reds, and I think it's just the colorations and the fact that it's just put together a little bit better, even though I believe these were from the same piecer. I was thinking about that the other day because I was saying these were the same piecer, and I thought, well, maybe I was confused and they weren't, because they are made differently. This one was with templates and machine pieced and this one was hand pieced. You know, now I'm confused and I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. But this one I plan on keeping. This one I may sell. I don't know. But anyway, those are the comparisons of the two quilts side by side, and they are both going to be bound with the same fabric. I'm going to use the backing, the fabric that I used for the backing. I had a large enough piece left over that I can fit it in binding, piece it into binding for both quilts. So I'm going to do that, and I just think that'll be better because especially this piece, this quilt here, I don't think it would look right with like a 30s reproduction binding on it. I just don't think that's gonna go with the fabrics in here, because there are a few 1930s feed sacks in here, but not very many, so I just don't think it'll go well. But this one, I think it could probably get away with it. Here's another feed sack here on this one. This one looks more like an 80s or 90s, you know, when they came back with those reproduction calicos like in the 80s. That's what this reminds me of. It's a kind of a paisley print, but that's what that reminds me of. Another feed sack here. This one I believe is more modern. So I'm not an expert at judging fabrics. I can usually pick out the 30s fabrics pretty well. Other than that, I'm kind of lost. I can do the 1920s, 1930s, sometimes 1940s, just because I've been working with those a lot, so I can tell those. But anything after that, unless I recognize it as a piece of fabric that I've had, I just don't know. So it's something I need to study on a little bit more. But anyway, there are the two quilts. I'm actually glad to be done with them. I do have other projects that I'm going to start working on. I've been playing around with a quilt design to use for the Hawaiian print fabric, so I'm going to start on that next. And I did make 4 of the big blocks, put them together into a top, and I like the way it looks, so I'm going to go ahead and use that pattern, and I'm going to start working on that quilt. And I'm kind of down to the last couple of quilt tops that I have, even though you saw all of those boxes in my shelf, my storage shelf over here in my studio tour. Most of those that are left are either small quilts or they are blocks that need to be put together. So I'm going to start working on that just to give myself a little bit something different to do. I'm kind of in the mood to start piecing again, so I'm going to do that, and I'll show you the pattern that I'm going to do for the Hawaiian prints, and I'm going to do that top and then get it quilted, and then I think I will go to some of the vintage blocks I have and start putting them together into tops, and I'll show you those. And I'm really wanting to get out to a flea market or antique shop here in the near future and look for some more vintage tops, and I'd like to bring my camera along and show you what I'm finding. So I think that might be a little bit interesting. So I'm also working on some feather design videos. I'm working on coming up with some ideas on how to show you how I go about designing feathers, and show you how you can design your own feathers for your quilt tops. And I know there was a request to show how I use French curves to make quilting designs, so I want to show you that. So I've got a lot of ideas, and it's just a matter of finding the time to get them all worked out and get them taped and edited and uploaded. So a lot of stuff is going on, at least in my head and on paper, so hopefully we'll get this on film and get it up so that you can see it. So those are my plans for the next couple of weeks, and I'll be having videos on everything that I'm doing. And I hope you enjoyed this video, the comparison of the two quilts. And it's not often that I do two of the same pattern right in a row, so I thought it was kind of interesting to compare them side by side and see the differences in the quilting designs as well as the fabrics that are in these tops. So I Hope you'll stick around so you can see those videos, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my newest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.